He stole a loaf of bread. That was the whole of his crime. Jean Valjean was a poor woodcutter, and one bitter winter, with his sister's children crying from hunger in front of him, he put his fist through a baker's window and took a single loaf. For that, France sent him to the galleys. 5 years. And because a desperate man runs, and each time they caught him they added more, 5 years became 19. 19 years chained to other men, breaking under the lash in the sun for a loaf of bread. Watch what that does to a soul. The woodcutter who went in had loved his family. The man who came out had taught himself a single lesson, that the world is one long cruelty, and every hand is against you. They handed him a yellow passport that branded him a dangerous ex-convict, and every door in France shut in his face because of it. He had paid for that bread 100 times over, and still they would not let him be a man again. So he stopped trying. If the world insisted he was a brute, he would be one. Hold on to that hatred, because everything that follows is the story of a man choosing, against all of it, to lay it down. One door in all of France opened. An old bishop, a man who kept almost nothing and gave the rest away, looked at the filthy, frightening stranger on his step, called him sir, sat him at his own table, and gave him a clean bed. And in the night, the 19 years won. Valjean took the bishop's silver and ran. By morning, the police had caught him and dragged him back to be identified and condemned for good. This is the moment the whole story turns on. The bishop looked at the thief who had just robbed him and told the police the silver had been a gift. Then he took his 2 silver candlesticks, the last things of value he owned, and pressed them into Valjean's hands, as though he had simply forgotten them. And when the police had gone, he said quietly, "Jean Valjean, my brother, you belong no longer to evil. With this silver, I have bought your soul, and I give it back to God." Feel what that costs a man to receive. 19 years of punishment had only made him harder. One man's refusal to treat him as he deserved broke him open in a single night. He wept, the first tears in 2 decades, because now he carried a terrible kind of freedom. He had been treated as good, and now he had to decide whether to become it. He chose. But for Valjean, choosing was never one moment. It was 1,000 of them. To build any life at all, the marked ex-convict did a dangerous thing. He broke his parole, buried his name, and made himself someone new. In a struggling northern town, he opened a small workshop, and it grew, and the town grew with it. He gave the poor honest work, built a hospital, fed the hungry, and asked nothing for himself. The people, who had no idea what he had been, loved him so completely, they made him their mayor. Understand what that means. The man the law had stamped a danger to society had quietly become the best man in the city. He had taken one bishop's mercy and was spending it, every single day, on strangers, turning grace into bread and work and dignity for people who would never learn his name. This is the part we forget about being good. It is not a feeling that shows up. It is a thing you build, choice by choice, in the dark, long before anyone thinks to thank you. But a buried name is only a shallow grave. And a policeman named Javert, who never once forgot a face, had begun to study the mayors, and to wonder. In his own factory worked a young woman named Fantine, with a secret she was dying to keep. A little daughter, left far away in the hands of cruel strangers, whom she was destroying herself to feed. When the others discovered the child and threw her out, Fantine fell. She sold her hair, then her teeth, then herself, sending every coin to a daughter she never got to hold. And here is the thing Valjean could not forgive in himself. It had happened in the shadow of his own factory, on his watch, while he looked the other way. By the time he understood, she was dying. He could have called it a tragedy and moved on. No law and no man required a thing of him. Instead, he knelt at the bedside of a ruined stranger and gave her his word that he would find her daughter, raise the child as his own, and that she could stop being afraid now. Fantine died believing him, and Valjean, who owed her nothing, picked up the burden of her child and made it the entire purpose of the rest of his life. That is what mercy does, once it is truly in a man. It stops being something he was given and becomes something he owes. Then his past set the cruelest trap of all. Word reached him that Jean Valjean had finally been caught, an old vagabond, arrested, about to be sent to the galleys for life as the escaped convict. But the man in chains was innocent, a bewildered stranger, mistaken for him. And the real Valjean understood, in an instant, that to be safe forever, all he had to do was nothing. Let the wrong man wear his chains. Hugo gives this night its own chapter. He calls it The Tempest Within a Skull. Picture it, the most respected man in the city, alone in a room, at war with himself until dawn. One voice reasons with him. You do more good as the mayor than you ever could in a galley. Stay, and 100 families keep their work and their bread. The other voice will not be silenced. A man is about to be buried alive under your name. He burns the proof of who he is and decides to stay. Then he claws it back out of the ashes. He calls for the carriage. He sends it away. He calls for it again. All night, the two men inside him fight for his soul. And in the gray morning, he walks into the courtroom where the stranger stands condemned and says the 4 words that burn down everything he has built. I am Jean Valjean. He gave up his freedom, his fortune, his name, the whole good life he had made, rather than buy it with one innocent man's ruin. Ask yourself, honestly, what you would have done in that room. That is the price of the Candlesticks. That is what he chose to become. He kept the promise. Before the law could close on him, he found Fantine's daughter, Cosette, a small, frightened girl, worked half to death by the innkeepers who kept her, and he carried her out of that misery into a new life. And something neither of them saw coming happened to the hard old man. He had been shown love exactly once, by a bishop. Now he discovered he had a vast, unspent store of it to give. He became her father in every way that counts, taught her to read by candlelight, sat up with her in the night, moved them both whenever the past drew near. For a man who had spent 19 years learning the world was cruel, raising that child was the slow, astonishing discovery that he himself did not have to be. He did not go soft because life got easy. It never did. He chose tenderness, on purpose, as the harder and braver thing. The convict had become, of all things, a good father. Love, it turned out, was the strength he had carried in him the whole time, only waiting for someone to spend it on. When Cosette grew up and gave her heart to a young revolutionary named Marius, Valjean followed the boy into the most dangerous place in France, a barricade in the Paris streets, where a doomed handful of idealists waited for the army to wipe them out. And there, fate handed him the one man who had hunted him for decades. Javert, the policeman, caught spying, bound, sentenced by the rebels to die. They handed the prisoner to Valjean, to execute. Stop and feel the weight of that. Here was the man who had chased him across his entire life, who would never stop, whose death would finally make Valjean safe. Tied up, helpless, a life that any court in the land would have said was forfeit. Valjean took him around the corner, out of sight of the others, and he cut the ropes. "Go," he said. "You are free." He answered a lifetime of persecution with the very gift the bishop had given him, and he handed it to the last man on earth who deserved it. Anyone can love the people who love them back. It takes the strongest kind of man to refuse to become his enemy. He would not buy his own peace with another man's blood, not even Javert's. The barricade fell, as he knew it would, and in the rubble, Valjean found Marius, the boy his daughter loved, unconscious, soaked in blood, barely alive. So the old man lifted that body onto his back and went down into the sewers of Paris, miles through freezing filth and total darkness, a dying weight on shoulders already worn out by a lifetime of suffering, for no reason on earth except that Cosette loved the boy, and that was reason enough. He carried him through the dark, out into the light, and laid him down, alive. As for Javert, the policeman could not survive what he had seen. A world in which a convict showed such mercy broke every rule he had built his life upon, and rather than live in it, he let the river take him. Valjean gave Cosette to Marius, and then, afraid his convict's past would stain her happiness, he did the last hard thing. He stepped quietly aside and let himself fade away alone, asking for nothing, the way he always had. But the truth reached them in time, and they came running to him at the end. So he died in peace, an old man at last forgiven, in the soft light of 2 silver candlesticks. From a stolen loaf of bread to a soul handed back to God, Jean Valjean was made strong, not by what he could seize, but by how much, in the end, he could be trusted to carry. The world measures a man by what he can take. Watch one like this, and you start to wonder whether it was always the other way around. And that is the measure of a strong man.